welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an amazing guest, Dr. Gerald Jones. Dr. Jones is an Associate Vice President of Student Life at Southwestern University. He is also a high-impact consultant, speaker, and thought leader. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Dr. Beck, for having me. I am so excited to be having this conversation about being positive. And I tell you, during this day and time that we're facing, we need more positive messages now more than ever. And so thank you for inviting me to your podcast today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dr. Jones. And truthfully, when I just want to let our audience know and our listeners, I found you on LinkedIn and your background is so impressive. And the reason I start with that is your background is inspirational. And it's all about positivity. It's all about positivity. And you have written a couple of books, and I definitely want to present this particular one we will be talking about today. So speak those things, achieving success by what you say. I love this. And I first actually, before we jump into the book, because I'm too excited to get into the book already, but why don't we just begin with a brief background and introduction of yourself, Dr. Jones?
Well, I am a native Floridian. I am from Florida, a small town called Palatka, Florida. I come from a mid-sized family. I grew up in a home where both of my parents were in the home. I'm so grateful for that. And I am the fourth of 5 children. And so I have 3 sisters and 1 brother. And along the way, there are lots of nieces and nephews. I have an 8-year-old. I am married, and I am just enjoying the life of now, doing the same thing that my father taught me to do, and he was there with me, and I see myself doing the same for my family. I graduated from high school, went on to college, and I'm sure we'll delve more into that later on. And so I'm just excited to be here and enjoying this journey with you, Dr. Beck.
Oh,
And please call me Gerald. Please call me Gerald.
Are you sure? Okay, as long as you say so.
Yeah.
Because it's certainly a lot of hard work that you put into. And of course, you received your doctorate of education at University of Central Florida, which at one point I was at Central Florida. So we definitely have something in common there. Go Knights.
Nice. Go nice. You can finish.
That's right. That's right. So I first want to actually dive into when you were giving obviously your introduction. I always like to pay tribute to those who help us lay our foundation, the support system. And as you mentioned, your parents were very present in your life. And so what is something like maybe, I'm sure there's many memories, of course, but is there one particular memory that maybe stands out, maybe a shared experience with your parents that always left you just either smiling or like full of positivity that would help you later on in your career?
Well, growing up in the South, we didn't have a whole lot of money. We didn't have a home where there were multiple bedrooms and bathrooms. Coming from a mid-sized family, we shared rooms. We had 1 bathroom in a house that had 2.5 bedrooms. And so we really didn't have a whole lot. We actually lived in my father's parents' home. But I will tell you this, Courtney, is that we had a whole lot of love in that house, and it was demonstrated.
Yeah.
It was shared, and this was a very exciting time of the year to receive those gifts. And so that was a precious memory that I will always cherish for the rest of my life, is that my parents modeled love. And it got better and better as they aged. My father is no longer with us. He passed, but my parents were married for 46 years. And I couldn't find a better group of individuals who modeled the way. We didn't have much, but if
Yeah.
we can just keep loving, love always makes the difference, and I'll never forget that.
That's wonderful. And thank you for sharing that. I totally have to agree, especially today when you talk about having that love, that support within the household. And it seems like today our society, it's heavily like consumerism based, right? Like you have to have this, you have to have that. But truthfully, like the value and the true fulfillment in life comes from the connection we have with others
Hmm.
and that love and support from our family, from our friends. And that's something that I've even spoken about on this podcast before, but being really cognizant and how we space our time out, how we balance our time. Because you could certainly get into that like rush, go, go, go mode with like your career. But truthfully, what really matters in life is those individuals who really help us along the way or who are always there for us through the good times and the bad times. So
Absolutely.
hopefully there are more good times, of course.
Absolutely.
But no, thank you for that. Very, very meaningful. And I wanted to move forward. As I mentioned before, you went to University of Central Florida, where you were a three-time
Yes.
graduate,
Yes.
and so congratulations on that. A lot of obviously hard work that goes into that. I wanted to start off when I was reading your background, your undergraduate degree was more so in political science and government. But then, as you would proceed into your doctorate degree, you received a doctorate in education. So, could you maybe provide just a background, like your thought process of starting in political science and maybe gearing more into education?
Well, like many college students, I thought that I was going to go to law school. We
Yeah.
start off majoring in one thing along the way, and all of a sudden, your values change, your interests change.
Mhm.
And that's what happened to me. I enjoyed studying politics. I enjoyed studying how people vote the way they do and think the way they do through policy. And as you know, we've just went through an election.
Mhm.
But what I was called to do more aligned with higher education.
Yeah.
And that's why I decided to pursue my doctorate in education from the University of UCAN Finnish UCF. I've been working in higher ed now for over 24 years. And so I decided because I am going to live in higher ed as well as probably retire in higher ed, it's best that become a doctorate of education. And
Mhm.
that's what I did. I had the opportunity to study in my research, high achieving Black males
Yeah.
to kind of understand what is it that they have that would give them the desire to do what they do successfully. And so that kind of gives you a synopsis of my areas of study and what happened between the poli sci days to where I am now in higher ed.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And I have to agree with you when you speak about how just throughout the years you may start with a particular major for your undergraduate degree and values, different experiences change the perception as to where you would like to head. I began with getting a bachelor's degree in advertising, yet I would end up in sport management for my doctorate degree. So it was interesting, but I always like to share that story because when I was pursuing my undergraduate degree, I really did not know what direction I truthfully wanted to go. I was quite frankly lost during that particular time of my life as far as the direction that I saw my career and where it could potentially go. But I always love to say that. And I would love to hear also what you tell students as well, just with your extensive background and like expertise in this area. But when I look back, I really regret not speaking to professors, just a 5 or 10 minute conversation. These are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. What is truly out there? And that is the one thing, especially when it comes to sport, as we know, like I thought I was just going to be able to go into coaching, for example, after I finished physically doing gymnastics. But as we all know, there's so much more to sport. And so I always encourage students, just walk up to a professor, have a conversation, feel that confidence, speak to somebody, don't be shy. And I think that's where it caught me. But I would love to hear maybe the advice you provide students.
Well, first of all, when students onboard into our institutions of higher learning, I like
Mhm.
to think that they have three lifelines
Yeah.
to depend on. The
Yeah.
first one is the admissions process. It is
Yeah.
so important that they check in with admissions to ensure that they have all of their documents in order, that they have all of the requirements to order to be able to begin right. And then the
Mhm.
second group of individuals that's there to support students are the academic advisors. Those are the individuals that will help students enroll in the right courses, to help them to begin with the end in mind, so that they can help students understand the value that these credentials offer our students. There's a whole lot of buzz going on around the nation with higher ed now, and
Sure.
not upholding the values that they should be. And so it's so important that students check in with their career centers, their career
Mhm.
development centers, to ensure that they are majoring in degrees or obtaining certificates that will help them achieve the American dream. And finally, to your point, it
Yeah.
is so important that students check in with faculty. I believe that the heart of student success are the faculty. And it is so important that they visit faculty with their office hours, that they stay
Yes.
engaged with faculty, not just inside of the classroom, but through co-curricular supports as well. It is so important. Faculty
Mhm.
are the gateway to achieving graduations at all of our institutions. And so you hit it head on, Courtney. It is so important that they stay connected with their faculty, because that makes the difference in them finishing.
Aw, thank you for that, Dr. Jones. And the one thing, I mean, I look back and I had such an enjoyable college experience. But the one thing I believe networking, or the concept of networking, is so, so important. It sounds cliche. We all talk about it. Um, but I do, if I could go back, I think that's the one thing I would really like push myself to do more of, because there was certainly opportunities to do that, career fairs, for
Mhm.
example. But at the same time, it was that shyness for me that got in the way. So I just always like to drive that home, especially for students. Don't be afraid, like get out there, ask questions, because it's such an exciting time of your life, because you could go in so many different directions. So
And
I
in
think,
terms of being shy, if I could just add this, it is so
sure.
important that students engage with their peers,
Yes. Mhm.
engage with student development, engage in student activities, join a club, join an organization. Those things
Yeah.
also contributes to a student finishing their college degrees by being more involved and more connected to the institution. And so, as you mentioned the word shyness, that's what we do in student development, is that we help break that shyness, that isolation away from students, because
Yes.
sometimes it is the isolation that makes students give up, quit, and don't make it to the finish line. And so I am so glad you as well, Dr. Beck, that you were able to overcome and keep pursuing until you finished multiple degrees.
Oh, thank you. And what's interesting, when you talk about just being active in those academic clubs and
Mhm.
internships, for example,
Yes.
but always, pairing up not just the academic, obviously you're there to get your degree,
Mhm.
but to really pair it up with experience too. You get to work with a multitude of different types of personalities out there, different, gained certain knowledge, obviously in different different areas that you particularly want to go in. So I always think that's such like a good lineup, like having your academic degree, but then being able to apply it in that area of interest. One thing I really wanted to go into and dive into, because this certainly sets the foundation, obviously, when you are pursuing your doctorate of education, your dissertation title is Black Males in Programs for High Achievers at a Community College. So, Gerald, I would love to understand why you particularly went in this direction for your dissertation.
Well, one of the things that we do in terms of writing dissertation and studying dissertation is where is the gap in the literature, right?
Mhm.
And so during that time, around 2014 or 15, when I started pursuing the doctorate, and it was time to decide on my topic, what
Mhm.
was that gap? And in terms of Black males and Black students in general, there is so much literature out there already
Sure.
talking about why those particular students don't make it to the finish line, why they don't persist at the same rate as their peers. 98% of the literature spoke about the academic failures of
Wow.
students who look like me, and
Mhm.
only 2% spoke about the academic successes of those particular students.
Wow.
Now you see the huge gap. We don't know enough about why those particular students succeed, persist, and are retained. And so, as I was beginning to confirm that topic, it was an aha moment
Yeah.
for me. My study was a qualitative approach, and I had about 7 individual males who were high achieving Black males who were attending local community colleges. And
Mhm.
so, what I found out was so profound, and I would like to share it with you,
Abs-
is that I discovered that those individuals had an indefatigable spirit about themselves. In other words, they had grit. There was nothing that would stop them from reaching their goals. We just spoke about isolation. They were isolated because they were singled out. They were in classrooms. Sometimes they were the only students who looked like them. So they really couldn't find holistically a community of supports that reflected their identity as high achieving males.
Mhm.
But they didn't let the isolation stop them from achieving their short term goals of completing their semesters, which will lead to their long term goals. I also understood with these individuals is that they made tremendous sacrifices to get to the finish line. They sacrificed relationships.
Yeah.
They sacrificed not attending the family barbecue. They
Mhm.
sacrificed having involvement with other significant others because they knew
Yeah.
that their priorities was to get their degree. They
Mhm.
went through shame because, it wasn't cool to be smart and Black
Mhm.
and a Black male. And so they were shamed by their peers, but they didn't let that stop them. Another issue as well, they didn't have a whole lot. They come from backgrounds like me. They didn't have high finances and lots of money, but
Sure.
finances was not a barrier that
Mhm.
they allowed to achieve their degrees. They showed up when they didn't have financial aid. They showed up when they didn't have the money because they believed in their heart of hearts that where there was a will, there will be a way. And so that separates, that's the secret sauce. No one has a monopoly over grit.
Yeah.
No one has a monopoly over being an indefatigable person. Those students persisted regardless of the barriers, regardless of the roadblocks. And if we can begin to stretch the literature beyond 2% to talk about why Black males succeed versus why they don't, I guarantee you we'll have more minoritized males finishing colleges today than ever before. So that was a synopsis of my research.
I love that. And I think just even from the beginning, as you said, always finding, like focusing on that gap to then literally, like you said, now we could go forward with really diving into that and expanding that literature too within that specific area. But I must say, when you talk about grit, resilience, that sense of like determination to finish that goal, which obviously in this case is a degree, but sport is so profound in doing that. I could certainly relate. Being a gymnast, I mean, literally, Gerald, you would fall flat on your face sometimes, and you'd have to pick yourself literally back up. And it taught me something that I would be able to apply to my professional career. Sometimes it's not always going to be the way that you thought something was going to work out,
Absolutely.
or you were going to head in this direction, but then all of a sudden something totally changes that. And so I think sport is just a profound, at least for myself, it was a profound impact on my life and teaching me about grit, resilience, that sense of determination. But when you spoke with students, and it does not even have to be in the research itself, but just in general in student life, do you see the positive impact that sport maybe plays in a student's life?
Absolutely. As you know, as you mentioned earlier in the introduction, I am now here in Texas. I am in the Austin, Texas metropolitan area, working, leading at a small liberal arts elite school, Southwestern University. And it is a Division III school. Um, 38% of our students who are enrolled are a part of sports programs. And
Wow.
so we rely heavily on these individuals to come to our institution to play Division III sports. And we see that as a mechanism, as a tool for those students to build community, to receive a liberal arts education, and at the same time, um, doing things that they enjoy, whether it is
Yeah.
football, whether it is cross country, or whether it is the swim team or basketball, baseball. There is something for many individuals. And as you know, athletes sometimes learn in their own environments, in their own shells. They have a community outside of a community. And so the very fact that sports may be the driver of them studying, um, it also contributes to persistence because they are engaging in team sports. They're learning how to work with others, and they're learning the concept of what it means to sometimes win and
Yeah.
sometimes you lose. But when you lose, the big test will be, will you still go to class? Will you still
Yeah.
report back next semester? Even if you don't start, your why should not be because you're part of the football team, but your why should be because I want to achieve economic mobility as well as social mobility. And the institutions of higher education provides the outlet for me to do that. That's what positive thinking means in
Yeah.
academia. Things don't always go as though we are planned, though that we have it planned to be.
Hmm.
But if we can always remain positive, if we can always use our mind, our mouth to
Yeah.
speak positive things, the outcome will be magnificent.
Thank you for that. And like what you were talking about, it always gets me so excited, the crossover between the lessons we learn in sport, even
Mhm.
at a young age. It could be childhood, early adolescence, or as we're obviously starting to move into our young adulthood. But that crossover between those lessons in sport, and then we experience life in college, balancing social life, sport, as well as
Mhm.
academics, just time management. I know that's always something that people bring up, and it does sound cliche, but that is the one thing I am so incredibly grateful for that sport teaches while you're in it. And when you speak about just that grit and resilience that, if you did lose a game, you still have class the next day. How exciting, Gerald, right? At 8 a.m. class.
Right. That's right.
So I think it really does teach such a good lesson, though, because as we all know, the next day going into work, like you have to clean the slate maybe from that day before that was maybe not a great day, but to show up with a positive attitude. And that's something sport taught me a lot of. And I've spoke about this in another podcast, but that idea in sport when you're working out, say you have or you're having a bad day,
Yeah.
you still have two events left as far as like gymnastics goes, but how do you have that will and that determination to still remain positive even though the day may not be going the way you
Right.
wanted to? And so I always go back to those examples to at least help you, of course, in your career, so
Yeah.
reminds you at least.
Yeah. Absolutely.
um so I do want to say, obviously, you have achieved tremendous success in your professional career. And your main focus, I would notice, is a lot on student life and student development. And you mentioned you recently just got into this position as an associate vice president for student life at Southwestern University. So I was wondering if you could speak upon those roles that you were previously in and how, like, things that you learned, lessons that you learned that would ultimately help you and propel you into this role you're currently in.
Well, I would tell you, Dr. Beck, that if someone would have told me 20 years ago that I would be working in Texas now, I would tell you you're living under a rock. There is no way that I would be here in the Longhorn State. But sometimes you have to accept life
Yeah.
where it gives you and trust that what you may have planned for your life
Yeah.
may not always be God's plan for
Yeah.
your life. And so it is a privilege for me to be working at Southwestern University, serving as Associate Vice President of Student Life. A year ago, I was not working. I was home working for my daughter, driving her around Tallahassee as she in the back seat being driving Miss Daisy. It was driving Miss Sydney. I took some time off to watch her grow up and I watched her go to school. It was a privilege for me to be home for over a year, to take her to school, to pick her up from school, take her to dance, take her to the hair appointment, do all those things for previous 7 years that she existed that I didn't have the time to do
Yeah.
because I was a workaholic, because I dedicated and sacrificed so much. I put work ahead of my family. And that is a lesson learned. And when that happens, God will allow you, or life will allow you, some
Yeah.
time to sit home and do some self reflection. I spent over 20 years working in the Florida college system for some tremendous institutions, Valencia College, Seminole State College, and now Tallahassee State College, where I ended my tenure there as Associate Vice President of Student Affairs. And so it was a privilege for me to take the entire 2023-24 season off to not just rest because I needed it, I was burned out.
Yeah.
But I also needed to refocus on what I believe my purpose and my calling was. And that was to use what God has given me through the power of speaking to help transform lives. And so I reconnected with my passion of public speaking, drgeraldjones.com, and I was able during that short time to impact so many lives across the nation as well as virtually. And although I am here in Texas, I have not resigned from my purpose and my passion of using my power, using my mouth to help people think positive, to do positive things, as well as achieve their goals. But I'm doing it here in my home base now in Georgetown, Texas, which is outside of Austin. And so all of those experiences have prepared me for this moment. Just tonight at 9:15 tonight, we will be having late night breakfast here at Southwestern. And I am hosting it along with our president office, President Trombley. We are so excited to serve students during
Mhm.
finals week. That's connection. As a result of those students attending this breakfast tonight, I am hoping that they will feel more connected to Southwestern University, that they will meet a new friend. And as we go home for the break, they'll come back or go home and say, Mom, Dad, this investment is well worth it. I feel like I have a
Mhm.
home away from home. And just knowing that just makes all the difference for me. I count it a pleasure to be here in this space, in this moment, during this time. There are no mistakes, there are no accidents in God's timing.
Yeah.
Everything is a Kairos moment for Him. And I am just delighted to be a vessel that He could use me for this season.
Wow, Gerald, thank you so much for just sharing with true authenticity your journey over the past year. Like you said, and I think it's so important. And as I mentioned even before, that sense of balance. And, I really don't know if there's like quite the balance that I say that, but like what truly is balance, right? Um,
Yeah.
but you're so right. I mean, I could relate to that of like really being a workaholic and it's like always
Yeah.
like what's next? What's next? I finished
Yes.
this. Like, and so when you say that though, it's reassuring that when there is a time of rest, and for me it was recently once I finished my PhD last December, that it was okay to rest and to not 100% know where you were headed, in January. I knew I was going to be teaching one course at the university, but what else could I do to help others? And it was through that quiet time. I would take walks. I even wrote blogs on this, but I would really take time to disconnect from everything, like, headphones out, earphones out. And really just take walks and be with nature,
Yeah.
where it was quiet. And I truthfully could hear my thoughts so well. I started forming just a sense of direction. Like every day, it seemed like something was coming to me. I love hearing people's stories. I think there's so much inspiration and that we could learn through others sharing their stories. And so it was piecing that together. But when you even speak about your daughter and spending time with her. What was something that really stood out during that time when you were able to spend quality time with your daughter?
I understood what conversation was.
Oh.
And so when I took her to school, our communication improved. I would ask her questions. We'll take time to listen to some music on the way to school. One of her favorite songs is a new song called Good Day. I'm going to have a good day, and talk about
Mhm.
positivity. That was something that she would repeat every day. And so as she got to school and things got a little challenging for her, she reminded herself that regardless of what's happening, I'm going to have a good day today. And so when I would pick her
Mhm.
up from school, I'm not just driving her home in silence. My
Yeah.
teeth are shining. I'm welcome to receive her because
Aw.
we took her to an environment where we trusted the school to take care of her. And
Mhm.
now it was my turn. How was your day, baby? Who did you sit with today? What
Mhm.
did you have for lunch today? Uh, what did you learn today? Were there any fun activities? And sometimes children can be fussy and tired and they don't want to talk. But I have to try to really bring out those questions that will encourage her to
Yeah.
engage, not engage with social media, not
Mhm.
engage with Messenger. But it is so important that at the dinner table, in
Yeah.
the car, that we are present in the now because
Mhm.
we only have moments. And when you have those moments, it is so important that you take advantage of those moments. For me, the moments were time. I took her all over Tallahassee, places that I took for granted because my wife would do it. I had to
Mhm.
take her to the hairdresser, to dance. I'm showing up to piano, doing all of those things. But it made the difference for me right now as I see
Mhm.
her continue to develop and grow. And so for me, once again, as per your question, it was
Yeah.
improving my communication, practicing effective communication, and dialogue with my 8 year.
That is wonderful, and I could certainly tell you, Gerald, that that's something that she's always going to remember because
So,
I'm telling you, like, when I look back, there's distinct memories, like moments in time when my father, he had sacrificed literally his whole life. I mean, he raised me as a single parent. He changed many jobs just to be able to be there, to take me to gym from school, to travel with gymnastics. And the one thing I could truly say is that when a parent is able to demonstrate to that daughter or that son that you matter and
yeah.
that time spent, like just like you said, and I think that's so important. I just want to like really repeat that again, but the importance of being present in a conversation today. I have mentioned it so many times on this podcast, but I have to be really cognizant. We could certainly, and you mentioned it, but be so involved in social media or just the internet in general, our jobs. But when you're at a dinner table, to really provide that other individual, if it's a significant other, if it's family in general, but eye contact, like, I respect you, I want to hear about your day, and I think that's something, at least for myself, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but that is certainly something I have to be cognizant of because those are moments you cannot get back. So I just think that's wonderful, and she is certainly going to remember that as she grows older, just spending time with dad. That's wonderful. Well, I would love to proceed forward. As I mentioned in your role, you've actually had a multitude of leadership roles. So I want to dive into the concept of leadership. And I want to open it up to you. But what are maybe some lessons in those roles throughout the years that you have learned and would like to share?
We just talked about a theme that I think is so profound in leadership is to be present.
Yeah.
Be present with those you lead and work with. And so be here and be no place else. Another concept that I have is to always have an open door policy, to be able to receive my team. I like to model the way. So I
Mhm.
am not just giving out assignments, but we are working collaboratively together. And so those who I have the pleasure and honor of supervising, I don't see them as my subordinates, but I view them as my colleagues. And so it is so important that I value their input. I value their big ideas, that
Mhm.
I value their creativities. Because listen, we live in a very diverse, different society.
Yeah.
And for the issues that we face today in our nation, no
Mhm.
one person knows everything.
That's right.
And that's how I lead with I don't know it all.
Yeah.
I've just been given the pleasure and the honor to be an associate vice president, but I don't have all of the answers. And so I rely heavily on my team members. And it doesn't matter how low they may think they are within the organizational chart, that
Yeah.
no matter where you are, lead where you are. We all have an ability to be leaders, whether you think you're a leader or not. Lead where you are. If you're out there landscaping the community, landscape with excellence. If your office is way down on the hallway and you feel like nobody is watching you, you have an opportunity to inspire and lead where you are. And so that's my philosophy on leadership. And it has made the difference for me as I've successfully continued
Mhm.
to climb the higher ed ladder. And I am so grateful for how I've been able to inspire my colleagues to live their best lives and also raise their competencies levels in leadership.
That is wonderful. And I have to agree with you with the idea of like never stop learning, that we could
Mhm.
always be learning. I think especially in education, like you could climb the ranks to that terminal degree, but today things are always changing,
Al-
always evolving. And
Always.
so I think it's always so good to have that mindset that we don't know everything and that we could always, because it's so true. I mean, like I was thinking just being in sport, like I've experienced sport physically, right?
Mhm.
You learn about in the books, but before I know it, I'll open up my phone and then there's something new that's happening in the realm of
Right.
sport. So
Right.
you really do have to like keep that forward thinking, and that you could always be learning more. So I 100% agree with you. But as we move forward, I definitely want to speak about your book. So,
Mhm.
as I mentioned before, I'm going to hold it up again.
Yeah,
There we go.
speak those
Woo-hoo.
things.
I love it. And it's so incredibly positive. That was the one thing. I mean, as soon as you open up the book, literally, to the today I will speak. I just wanted to read a couple of them, but it's so profound and it's so positive. Today I will speak I can, not I can't. Today, I will speak encouragement, not doubt. Today, I will speak life, not death. And you certainly go on, but I just want to begin, Gerald. What made you write this particular book and then having that outlook of positivity?
Well, I wrote Speak Those Things back in 2006, I believe, and
Yeah,
was released in 2007. It was during a time in my life when I was on the motivational speaking circuit.
yeah,
And, as motivational speakers, we need a message. People will not hear you if you don't have a message. And
yeah.
so I wanted to write something on positivity. That's really what it was. It was,
I love
you
it.
know, you know, a lot of times we focus on negative aspects of life,
Yeah,
and that's easy to get caught up in. But I wanted to send a message to the nation, if not the world,
yeah,
that our mouths were not made to speak bad, to speak negative, to speak defeat. But the purpose of our tongue was to do exactly as I wrote, exactly as you paraphrase, to
yeah.
say, Good morning. Today is going to be a magnificent day. Good afternoon. I feel good. Have you ever heard of someone when you ask them how they feeling is always, oh boy, I'm so tired. Oh, my back is hurting. My knee is hurting. Everything is hurting. I'm not ever going to finish. Is this, is that? And if it's not one thing, is another. That's not what Speak Those Things is about. It is
Mhm.
achieving success by what you say. You are what you speak. And so today, it is cold, but I'm going to be okay. It may be hot wherever you are. God
Mhm.
already knows that. He doesn't need our help reminding him about his
Right?
weather. Just accept it and receive it and don't be overcome by our circumstances. And that's what
Mhm.
Speak Those Things was. And it's so funny, Dr. Beck, that I wrote that many years ago, but it is so relevant today. It is as relevant today as it was 15 years ago. And I pick it up every now and then to inspire me along this journey of life.
Well, I have to agree with you. It is truly inspirational. Just reading, I want to pull out one particular excerpt from it. You have, which I love. I'm a big quote person. So
Mm.
you have so many quotes in there that just really made me smile. And like I said, bringing out that true positivity. But you have this chapter, and it's called Passing Exams, it no longer takes a village to raise a child, it takes a nation. So I was curious if you could expand upon that statement.
I've heard always that it takes a village to raise a child.
Mhm.
And I say for the issues that we were facing back then, even more issues now, it takes a nation.
Yeah.
Each one of us have a unique part to contribute to transforming the lives of others
Yeah.
by what we say, by the hand we extend, by the heart that we show or have, and the
Mhm.
grace that we give to others. The patience. Who are you on the highway? Are you blowing a horn because somebody is driving slow in your way? Or do you give people the grace even on
Yeah.
highways? When you're in grocery stores, this is a busy time of the year.
Yeah.
Who are you at Target? Who are you at Walmart? Are you bringing in those stores with patience, or are you extending grace to others? And when you have the ability to extend grace to others, then you realize that you're humble, you're not perfect. We're
Yeah.
all vessels trying to perfect ourselves. That's why we stay in the stores and shop, because we're never satisfied with yesterday. We're never satisfied
Mhm.
with today. We always want what tomorrow has to offer us. And so that's what that concept is. It takes a nation to extend
Mhm.
grace and values to the next generation.
I think that's such a beautiful message. And I think more so today than ever, really focusing on, like you said, I mean, really having patience. We're all in a rush, it seems like. I mean, we all have, a career or it's family or, I mean, you name it, but to really take time, I've spoke about this a lot and it's actually really interesting to me because it's been happening more often, but taking the time if you are out at the store or a grocery store. But there's been so many times where when you ask just one more question, you would be amazed that there's some common interest there. And I have to share this story because it really is, you can't even make this up. But I was getting dinner one night and there was three gentlemen. It was at like it was at Southern seafood market there,
Mhm.
and there was three gentlemen there. And make long story short, like, oh, do you need this on ice? And I'm like, no, no, I'm good. Like, I'm just going straight home. And this other kid's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna go home too. And this other gentleman was like, gosh, because I have to study so much tonight. And once again, as I mentioned, I just want to reiterate that I asked one more question. And I said, oh, no kidding. I said, are you in at FSU? Yes. Oh, really? What major? Sport management. He responds without me even saying, he goes, are you Dr. Beck? I can't make this up, Gerald. I mean, we looked at each other. He goes, I have your class next semester. I mean, it is so interesting. It was a light bulb moment to me. And this has happened to me at least three times. I could tell you stories, but it's teaching me a lesson to really take time to connect with
Yes.
our community.
Yeah.
So I was curious if you could maybe expand upon that because you've certainly spoke about connection and community, but if you could just expand your thoughts on that and how important it is present day.
Well, I believe that Gerald exists to serve not himself,
Yeah.
but serve others.
Mhm.
And that is the mindset. That is my philosophy of living. That is why I am here in Texas. It is not about my will. It is not about my aspirations only. It is not just about what I want to do, but this is a part of a calling. And the story that you just mentioned, you can't turn your calling on and off when you want to. It always precedes you. It followed you in the grocery store. You just didn't know.
Yeah.
And so when you are called and you are living on purpose, right? That is the magic. That's the secret sauce. How do you live on purpose during these crazy times and theories that we are a part of today? How do you remain centered so that you are able to extend your hand and that you're able to make yourself available, right? You never know who's watching you. Your student followed you, and that was a test. That was a reminder for you, Dr. Beck,
Yeah.
is that purpose. How do you wear it? How do you own it? How do you release it? How do you accept it? And how do you trust it?
Wow. That is so powerful. Gosh, I want to unravel all of this. So first off, I think the importance of understanding, like, for example, when I was coming out of my degree program, I really have a strong faith. And that calling to not only help students in teaching, in the realm of teaching, but then also go in this direction that I'm in. It has certainly been questioned, like, what exactly are you doing after your PhD? But when I truly believe that when you are called to do something, it starts, like, I think for me, it was like a quiet whisper, essentially.
Yes.
I started witnessing, just really like focusing on what was happening in the world. It wasn't just the narrow focus that I had been obviously within, I don't know, it was like the last 4.5, 5 years in that PhD program in sport per se, but really opening up that lens and how could I be of service. And, we discussed too, you were certainly mentioning it, but that idea of servant leadership. I know that's something that I've started to really dive into, and I do feel that within this next chapter, if you will, of my life, it really is. It's to focus on what that message is in each interaction, and I'm very in tune to learning something from, just like I said, just that short interaction. What was it teaching me in that
Right.
moment? It was, hey, Courtney, slow down,
Yeah.
get to know people. And you never know, like I said, just asking one more question, what it could lead to. And so I just, Gerald, I have to just say, like, a little bit off tangent, you are an excellent speaker. I felt so comfortable speaking with you, but how you inspire your audience and your listeners with your shared experiences, those lived experiences. I just want to say that, like, it truly, like, just speaking with you, it's very inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate
Ab-
it.
Absolutely. And speaking of literally speaking, you are a speaker and you have a just a tremendous background within that realm. Your clients have included Texas A&M University, the Environmental Protection Agency, United States Veterans Affairs. So, Gerald, what made you go into the realm of speaking?
Well, I grew up in the South, and this time of year, every year, I was in church. We would have Christmas speeches. So I got my practice in at a very early age. So I
Mhm.
was never, while I was afraid of the stage, I wasn't that shy from the stage, right? Because I felt like that's what my parents, you know, told me that you had to be engaged also in your faith in church. And so
Yeah.
that gave me the practice. And one day, when I had finished college, I think it was undergrad in 1997, I was applying for all these jobs and nobody would hire me. I never heard back from anybody. And all of a sudden, I
Mhm.
remember a scripture that came to mind and it said, stir up the gift that you have within you. What is it that you're good with? What gift that you have? And I sat down and had time with God. And in those moments, birthed my desire through those conversations. I am gifted with my voice. I
Yes.
am gifted with my words. How do we put those two together to make some cash and
Yeah.
to make some economic mobility? And that's exactly what I did. I'll never forget. I was in Norfolk, Virginia, and I began to write my first book. together on one accord,
Aw.
building God's kingdom on earth. And since then, speak those things, achieving success by what you say. And so that's where that started from. I was able to stir up the gifts. When I found myself in a wasteland experience where I didn't know which way to go, move to the left, right, front, or backwards, God said, be still. I already have an assignment for you. And that assignment was writing as well as public speaking.
Wow, that is a powerful message. And I know many people will be able to certainly relate to it. I know I certainly relate to it. Like I said, I mean, when you're ending a certain chapter in your life, I really do. I go back to it because it was such a profound like end point. But once I was done with that program last December, there's a sense of anxiety that starts stirring. What's next? Like we were talking about throughout this conversation. But I could certainly speak from experience to say that you have it within you, and that voice. That was, at least for me, I was starting to piece the puzzle together. I love talking about life lessons. I love hearing people's story, sport experiences, career experiences, but how the answer eventually, it comes out and it leads you into that direction that you're headed. And I think for me, to be able to help people, and by you sharing your story, Gerald, I really do. I think a lot of people are going to relate to it because I know, like I said, I was certainly lost at certain points of my life, but I think it's always good to remind others too that, with that time, it always works out. I've had so many times in my life where I don't know what's happening next. I don't know what direction I'm going in my career. But I could truthfully say, like, when you just have that faith to allow those steps that you walk in to lead you, you never know, like I said, how it's going to come out, and nobody knows obviously what tomorrow's going to bring. But I could certainly say from experience, like I could not be happier than what I'm doing today, not only obviously with this business and sharing your story here on the platform today, but then also teaching, really giving back to students. But all that to say, it all works out for everyone. So, Dr. Gerald Jones, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on this podcast. And I would love to end with a positive message or a positive quote.
I will tell you, to all of the listeners, of plenty of positivity with Dr. Courtney Beck, is that your future is bright. Don't give up on your dreams. Don't go by what you feel, go by what you know.
Yeah.
And know this, as I have known, that all things are possible if you believe and have the grit to exceed. And so it has been an honor to be with you this past hour, Dr. Beck. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gerald Jones. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And thank you for sharing all your wisdom, your knowledge, and of course, just inspiration and positivity. So thank you once again. And I wish you all the best as you move forward.